So this is step 17. This is doing the placement line. So this is for the stem at the top. Just remembering to hold down that fabric there, that green fabric, where it's joined, just so that the foot doesn't get caught in it. Now your placement line's been stitched. Place fabric E, which is your stem fabric, right side up over the placement line. Step 18 is stitching it down. Okay, so that's fabric's been stitched down, so remove your hoop from the machine, and you're wanting to trim this, so you're trimming it as close as you can to the stitching. We are leaving the material at the end there because that's going to be part of the seam of the mug rug. So as you can see, we're just going in along the sides of the stem. We're not going across the top of the stem there, we're going to leave that bit of extra fabric in the seam. So you can see we've now trimmed the stem, leaving that little excess bit of fabric there that'll be in the seam of the mug rug. We've now put the hoop back into the machine and we're ready for our next step, which is step 19, embroidering around that stem. Okay, so that's the satin stitch around the stem finished. You'll see there is still green fabric left on the outside of the satin stitch. That's meant to be there. That's all going to be included in the seam when we sew the back on for the mug rug and turn it all out. You won't see that, so you don't trim any more of that green. That all stays there. So this is step 20 now. We're stitching the placement line for the leaf. So now we've cut a small piece of fabric. We don't give you the measurements for this in the instructions. You just need to cut a small scrappy piece of fabric big enough to cover that placement line. So just slip that in there. Place it right side up on the hoop and we're away to go. Once again, we don't adhere this down, we just lay it flat on top. Just make sure that it's all smooth. Pull it out a little bit, just making sure you don't stitch it. That's been stitched exactly on top of that placement line. So now we're ready to trim. So we've just finished step 21. We've removed the hoop from the machine and trimmed as close as we can around the stitching. So now we're up to step 22, which is embroider the satin stitch around the leaf. Okay, so that's all the satin stitching finished around the leaf. We've finished completely doing the front now. We're on to doing the back with the mug rug. You leave this in the hoop, and to get your fabric C, you place it wrong side up on the hoop. This is the piece for your backing of the mug rug. So this is wrong side facing up. So it's basically just covering everything there. Okay, so now steps 23 will be the stitch down. it'll stitch down and leave an opening for turning, so we'll watch this doing this one. Just making sure that the fabric's all flat. We just give it a bit of a gentle pull down the end just to make sure that it's stretched out. No wrinkles on the fabric touching the fingers. So this is doing the outline of the pumpkin for you. Okay, so you can see it's left a gap there. That's where we will turn it. Now the next step is 24, and we're stitching it again with the triple stitch. Okay, so the machine's just finished that step and it's done a triple stitch around it to secure the seam. Next thing we do is we remove the mugrug from the hoop. Okay, so we're removing the finished mugrug from the hoop now. Now we're going to trim the batting out of the seams and then trim the seams to about 1/4 of an inch, clipping all of the corners. So with all of these projects, you are left with batting and stabiliser in the seam. So to make it easier to turn and less bulk in your finished article, it's best to trim as closely as you can to that stitched seam without cutting the fabric, obviously. Sometimes you'll find that it's easier to turn the work over so you can actually see the stitching at the back. Just around this fiddly part of the stem, we're trimming away as close as we can. So we've trimmed all the batting out of the seams. Now we're trimming our seams to 1/4 of an inch. Just where we have that opening there left for the turning of the mugrug, we don't cut that back. We leave that wide there, as you can see, because we need something to fold back in when we're stitch back in when we're stitching up the opening. We get on the other side of where that opening would be. Leave that extra fabric in the seam, and then just trim back the rest of the seams to 1/4 of an inch. You do this right around. So we have our seams all trimmed. Now we're going to make the turning of the mugrug easier by clipping off the corners. As you can see, we just take off that corner end there, and on the other one, just gives less bulk in the seam when we do turn it. So they're cut, and then we clip into the corner. Without stitching, you cut as close as you can into that V in there, and then the other corner. This will give a bit of movement in that seam when we turn it. Then, even on the curve, we like to cut, just clip little cuts along there without cutting the stitching. But around a curve, it gives more flexibility in that seam, so it'll should be able to turn and give a better finished product. Okay, so all the seams are now trimmed and clipped, and now it's time to turn it out. You can be quite rough when you're turning out your mugrugs. We have triple stitched those seams, so they're quite robust. And you do need to apply a bit of force to get it all through those holes. So then, of course, it takes a little bit of working the seams to get them all nice and flat. So we just use the end of a pencil. You just get into all the corners. And And that's why it's so important to do that triple stitching around the mug rug, because you're going to be doing applying a bit of pressure, turning it all out. So we'll work on that a bit and then we'll show you the finished product. So there, that took a matter of seconds to turn out. Using an implement to push out the corners there, that stem didn't give us any trouble at all. Of course, this will look a bit better once we've ironed it. I just wanted to show you as soon as this is the finished product, as soon as we've just turned it. Okay, so this is the mug rug all ironed. You can see down the bottom there, that's the opening. So it needs to be folded in. With our mug rugs, a normal rectangular mug rug, you could glue this opening together quite easily. But because this has got a curve, it's going to require a little bit of working to get that nice curve. So we'll hand stitch that with a needle and thread. We'll show you what it looks like when we're finished. Okay, so now we've hand stitched that seam closed. So that's the back of it, and then the front, we've been able to achieve a nice curved shape there with that stitching. So that's all done now, the pumpkin, all done. So with our instructions, we provide, as well as all of the requirements for the fabric, step by step with photos. So at every step you do, we provide a photo. And if there's something special that we need you to follow, we'll actually insert an arrow and give you an extra bit of a note there on what to do. So that's the end of our mug rug